Today, the focus of our presentation is on motivation and how, like, different ways that we can motivate your children and then obviously my clients. So, when we're talking about motivation, we are talking about the general desire or willingness of someone to do something. And this is basically just the reasons or the reason that anybody has for acting in a particular way. So, it's really like the why. Like, why is my child engaging in this behavior? Why is my friend, anything. It's just why humans do the things that we do. And this is especially relevant to our work in ABA and as a parent with a child on the spectrum, because a lot of the time it can be a little bit more difficult to find things that are really truly motivating to our kids. And so that's going to be kind of the focus of this presentation again, is just the ways that we can determine items or activities or like interactions or just whatever it is that's going to motivate our child to do the things that we need them to do that they may not necessarily want to do or be intrinsically motivated to do. And so the way that we do this in behavior analysis is through preference assessments. So what is a preference assessment? It is basically a set of procedures used to determine if one or more stimuli may function to increase the rate of a specific behavior or behaviors when delivered following the occurrence of that behavior. So that's kind of a mouthful, but it's basically it's an assessment that we conduct in order to determine different toys, really anything. It could be anything under the sun. That a child is more willing to gravitate towards, or to just kind of see like what do they prefer.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And there are a lot of different ways to do this. And we'll kind of run through them. There are more formal preference assessments that we would typically conduct. I mean, we can do it in the home setting, absolutely. But that's one that I would conduct in my role in the clinic more often. And that's when I'm really trying to determine like a hierarchy of potential reinforcers. But then there's also more sort of informal preference assessments that are a little bit more fluid, that you can really like conduct throughout the day with your child, even in different settings, different environments, different people. So we're going to kind of run through what those look like. So again, like the purpose of preference assessments, many individuals with developmental disabilities are not able to indicate their preferences and dislikes. So you may not be able to just ask your child, what do you want to work for? What do you want to do right now? What sort of leisure activity are you interested in? They may not be able to express that to you. So conducting a preference assessment is a really great way to kind of pinpoint those things for your child. And it's really important to remember that we can't assume that just because we like something or we're motivated by something, or maybe even, your child's sibling is motivated by something, that doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily be motivating to your child on the spectrum. It's something, or really any two people, right? It's something that's really personal, really individualized. And so that's why we like to conduct one of these preference assessments. So here are some examples. So this would be a paired stimulus preference assessment. And that basically just means you're presenting the child with two options and you are just recording which one they choose first. So in this example, the child chose the like spinning light toy over the Pop-It toy in the first assessment. And then the clinician repaired the Pop-It toy with a new toy. I can't actually see what that is. Maybe like kinetic sand. And found that the child chose the kinetic sand. And then again, repaired the Pop-It toy with something new, the toy phone. The child chose the phone, right? So that's a pretty clear indicator that that Pop-It toy is probably not super preferred to this child.
Right.
because they chose other options 3 times in a row, right, over the
Yeah.
pop-it toy. And so then they just continued to present the items that were chosen. So the light toy and the kinetic sand, they paired them together to see which one the child preferred. And then the light toy and the cell phone paired together to see which one they chose. And then the cell phone and the kinetic sand. So that gave a pretty good indicator that probably the kinetic sand is the most highly preferred because that was the item that was chosen 3 times, followed by the spinning light toy that was chosen twice. So that's probably like a second tier preference. And then the cell phone toy is probably the third tier preference. So when we are talking about the assessment methods, the different assessment methods that we're doing, basically it's just important to know that it is systematic. It may not always necessarily feel like it is, depending on what preference assessment you're doing. Like I said, some are more formal than others, but it is truly like it's a systematic process that you use to rank uh, items, toys, activities, again, kind of in a list, 1 through whatever, to see what your child prefers or what is the most highly motivating item for them. So let's talk about preference assessments with parents. So another pretty common preference assessment method you can use is just a single item or a single stimulus preference assessment. This is really the quickest and easiest way to kind of get a pretty good indicator of, again, what's motivating for your child. So this basically involves you kind of have a select, group of items that you want to test, and you give them to your child one at a time, and you just record how long your child plays with that toy. And then when they're finished with it, you can present them the next one and then record how long they play with that. And obviously, like in doing that, the items that your child engages with the longest are most likely going to be more motivating for them. And then we can also conduct preference assessments through just direct observation. And we can do this at home or in the clinic setting. A lot of the time, well, not I wouldn't say a lot of the time, but often I will use direct observation or free operant preference assessments when I'm doing initial assessments. So if it's I have a new client that I don't know too much about, we're just getting them into the clinic to do their initial assessment, to write them up a treatment plan, to get them started with services. Basically, all it involves is you just kind of stand back and observe your child navigate whatever environment that they're in, and then keep a log of the items that they choose, right? So, for example, if I have a client come into a therapy room to do an initial assessment, and I kind of show them where all the toys are, and I'm like, okay, like, what do you want to pick? You can choose anything. What do you want to play with? And I noticed like they beeline for the Legos, right? That's the first thing that they pick. That's a pretty good indicator. Legos are probably motivating for them. Um, but yeah, so you basically just kind of keep a list. You watch what your child does. You can pay attention to how long they interact with different toys, but really it's just to kind of get a list going of the things that you know that they're interested in. And then you can kind of use that list if you want to conduct a more formal, thorough preference assessment. You can use that list to then conduct like the paired stimulus preference assessment that we talked about, or the single stimulus preference assessment, because you've already identified kind of like a bank of options that you know your child is at least interested in engaging with. And this is an example. You can also do preference assessments on if you on a excuse me AAC devices. So if your child uses like a speech device or an iPad or something else to communicate, you can conduct preference assessments that way too. So even if you don't have the items like necessarily right in front of you, you can show your child pictures of 2 items and then record which ones they select. I've never done that actually. I think that's a really interesting idea though. Okay, so kind of where are we going with this, right? So once you have identified potential reinforcers, right? That's what we're doing. We're trying to identify items that your child is motivated enough by to do the things that they don't necessarily want to do, right? Um, and that can be, again, the motivation can be in the form of an object, a condition, or an event that is presented immediately following a behavior that increases the frequency of that behavior. So, for example, if you are potty training your child, and he gets to play with his favorite toy after he uses the bathroom on the toilet, that toy is the motivating item, and the behavior is using the toilet. So your client, your child is
But they
willing to
are
sit
kind
on
of
the
clients
toilet.
as well, and many times they're actually more difficult than clients.
I know it's like it's an easy slip to make. I'm like, wait, which mode am I in right now? Um, yeah, so earning access to that toy is what's motivating that little boy to sit on the toilet and use the bathroom. So there's also we can also use kind of delayed motivation. So in that example, the kiddo got the toy right after they used the bathroom on the toilet. But you might also introduce like a potty chart or like a chore chart or, something that your child has to engage in specific behaviors for a specific amount of time in order to earn that thing, right? So when I was a kid, my mom loves a chart. We had a chore chart. If we earned stickers based on things like making our beds, like keeping our clothes, off the floor, the little things that you would expect your child to do that like sometimes are really difficult for kids to do, right? Um, and if we earned enough stickers at the end of the week on a Friday, then we would go out and get ice cream, right? So that's an example of delayed motivation. And I will say like that is delayed motivation can be really effective for some kids, but for a lot of our kiddos, they need more more immediate reinforcement for the behaviors that we are wanting to see them increase, the behaviors we want to see them do more. They may need more immediate reinforcement to really keep them motivated to continue those behaviors. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. It's really individualized based on your child. Okay, so again, now that we know what they look like, we know what preference assessments look like, what do we do with this? How do we use this information? Um, so a really great example or a really great strategy, I love this. I use this at the clinic all the time, behavior specific praise. So that's really when you want to like catch your child doing something that you want them to continue doing, right? So if I'm at the clinic and I notice that my client has been sitting at the table with this therapist, um, and he's like using really nice manners with her, right? Like saying please, thank you, yada yada, whatever, right? I'm gonna go over to my client and say, I really love how you're using such nice manners. You're saying please and thank you. You're doing a really great job. So instead of just saying, your client, let's say your child um puts a dish away and you're like, amazing, great job. You want to actually name the behavior that they're doing when you're giving them that praise. So instead of just saying good job, you would say, great job putting the plate away. It sounds simple, but it is really effective because you are naming the behavior that you want to see increase and then providing praise contingent on your child engaging in that behavior. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, cool. I love that one. I do it all the
Yeah,
time.
we kind of already do that, and the sticker things, we do that too. In general, is because we feel my son from time to time don't really eat very well. He like doesn't have enough interest in eating, so we tend to have like a sticker system. If he eats well and he accumulates 5 stickers, some good things will happen. Like usually we let him play a toy or watch some TV. So yeah, similar
Yeah.
concept. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And like that is a literal perfect example of like that delayed motivation. And I love that you That's really kind of thinking outside the box. I love that you applied that to eating, right? Because that's something that a lot of kids have a hard time with, and
Right.
so I
Somehow,
love
like
that.
the teacher reflects that he eats well at school, but not so much at home. And sometimes maybe he like wants the parents to feed him because he doesn't see us throughout the day since
Hmm.
we will be at work. So I understand the emotional needs to be bonding with us, but we still would prefer that he can eat independently, right? So we try to use this to encourage him.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean I think that's amazing. I think that's really really great. Um, yeah, so moving on to kind of number two, expect excellence. Set high but realistic goals. So I like to think of these as positive expectations instead of high expectations, right? Um, we want our expectations to be realistic to what, our clients or your children are able to do right now, and really meet them where they are, but still expect them, like, what your kid can do, right? Like, expect them to be like striving for the best version. But obviously like within the context of what is reasonable and what's realistic. And then show your enthusiasm. So use like concrete examples. So again, like that kind of circles back to behavior specific praise. Get really excited, when your child does something that you want to see them do more, and really name it. Like name it to them of what they did that's made you so enthusiastic, what they did that made you so excited. It really, really is, it's meaningful. And then lastly, mix it up. So we want to vary our reinforcers within reason, right? Um, a lot of the time, not a lot of the time, but sometimes I find that my clients will be like super, super into a specific toy for like a week, and they'll do anything for that toy, right? It's super motivating to them. And then the next week, don't care. It doesn't matter anymore. They've moved on. They've satiated on that reinforcer, right? They've gotten access to it so much that it lost its motivating value. And so that would be a situation where I would then need to probably conduct one of the preference assessments that we talked about to determine, okay, what else? Like, what else do we have that's going to motivate my client? Do you ever find that with your son?
Yes, kind of a constant shifting target.
Yeah.
Like his interest in like, or in this case, preference, I guess, is lingual, constantly shifts, right? Like, and the kids have very short attention span or the likings of one object or some activity. So I feel like he's finding what's piquing his interest now. It definitely is the case. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, to your point too, with like shifting interest, I also have a couple clients where, they might be super motivated um to do something that they like don't like to sit at circle time, right? To sit at circle time for 5 minutes in order to get like a spinning light toy, right? They will do that. That is no problem. But then when I ask them to do something a little bit more rigorous than that, like something that's a little bit more difficult for them, the light toy loses its value, right? Like that toy isn't valuable enough. It's not motivating enough to compete with the difficulty level of what I'm asking my client to do. So in that case, again, that's a good situation to like have a ranking of like a one, two, three, four, five, and kind of keep those super, super, super highly preferred, extremely motivating items. Keep them to use when those clients of mine or your kids, you're asking them to do something that is really hard, and they might need something that's like top tier motivating, in order to kind of help them cooperate with what you're asking them to do. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. And we want our kiddos to be active participants. Obviously, like this is all about their interests. I have some clients too who I can just ask them, like, what are you into right now? Like, tell me about like what do you do after therapy? What do you do after school? What are the things that you like to do at your house, right? And I can use that information to kind of guide potential reinforcers that I might present to those clients. Always providing choices, and again, relating to our kids' lives within the context of being functional and appropriate. Um, so if I have a 17-year-old client, I'm probably not going to offer like a Barney stuffed animal as a potential reinforcer, right? We could do a stuffed animal, but I would want to find something that is more age appropriate to them. So that's always something to keep in mind too, as our kids are transitioning and getting older and maturing. The reinforcers should be maturing along with them. And then document improvement, visuals always help. And again, just reward positive behaviors. That behavior specific praise, enthusiasm, and then again, like providing the reinforcer contingent on your child engaging in the behavior that you want them, that you want to see more of, that you want them to be doing more often. So just diving a little bit deeper into the things that we talked about. I know I kind of like ran through them a little bit, but for a little bit more information, catch them being good, right? So this is behavior specific praise. We want to do this. Like I said, I do this all the time. I do this with kiddos who are not even my clients. If I see them at the clinic, like just really crushing it, I always make sure to give them some behavior specific praise. And in doing this, it also helps to decrease the use of negative commenting because we're not talking about what they're not doing. We're talking about what they are doing, right? So if I want my client to, again, like sit during circle time, I'm going to provide that praise and attention to when they are sitting instead of if they stand up, me saying, oh, well, it looks like you're not sitting right now. It's like, okay, we know he's not sitting, right? Let's reinforce the appropriate behavior and kind of minimize the attention that we give to like the more inappropriate behavior. And if you know your child's strengths, this is a chance to focus on them. Again, just catching them being good, making sure that they are getting like positive reinforcement throughout their day. Everyone wants to hear that they're doing a good job, right? Especially kiddos, who have more difficulty doing those things. So we want to just, focus on their strengths, catch them being good. And then number two, expect excellence. So again, this is related to having positive expectations, but those that are realistic. So we need to have realistic goals. We know that our child's development, so let's focus on the ones that come first. So for example, John will independently follow two-step commands after, sorry, following or two-step instructions will come after John can follow one-step instructions without prompts. So again, like we want to just stay with our child, stay where they are, keep pushing, and always have like those positive high expectations. But let's be realistic about where they are right now and meet them there. And of course, we want to set our kids up for success and not failure. And then show your enthusiasm. Oh, yep. Yeah, I mean, we talked about this, there are some kiddos who just love it when you just lose your mind about something that they've done. I mean, I look crazy at the clinic sometimes when my kiddos are like when they do something they've never been able to do before, or they do something that I really, really want to see them do more of, like I will lose my mind. If that's what they like, if that's what motivates them, I will holler, I'll throw my hands up, I'll jump up and down, whatever it takes, right? I want them to know that I'm enthusiastic about what they're doing and yeah, just providing a lot of that enthusiastic praise. And then mix it up. So varying reinforcers. So again, this is we kind of already ran through this, but just because your child was really into something yesterday doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be motivating today. So again, that's why we want to kind of continuously be conducting these preference assessments, whether you're doing a more formal one, like the paired stimulus preference assessment or the single stimulus preference assessment, or if you're just kind of observing your child every day and seeing like, okay, today he seems to be really into magnet tiles. Like, okay, maybe I can use the magnet tiles, right? So first let's clear the table, then you can have your magnet tiles. And then tomorrow it might be Legos, and then the day after it might be slime, right? It could be different day to day, week to week, month to month. So it's just always important again to just be continuously conducting these preference assessments to make sure that the reinforcers that you're offering your child are going to be actually motivating to them. And then have your child be an active participant. Yeah, so having the child participate in their learning keeps them on track, right? When you're on task, you naturally decrease the amount of time that you are off task. For example, Joey likes to move around. He's constantly reprimanded for getting out of his seat. Joey can set snack for siblings. Joey can clean off the table with wipes. Joey can close the door. Joey can get the crafts, turn on and off the light, turn on the music, etc. Right? So we know that Joey likes to move around. Let's give him appropriate ways to get that energy out, right? Like he can be, mom's helper. He can, um, set the table, whatever it is, something positive that he can be doing with that energy. Give him a way to actively participate in what's going on around him in a functional and appropriate way. And then provide choices. So yeah, we talked about you can take pictures of preferred items or activities, and that could be a chance to use them. So for some clients who are not able to necessarily vocally communicate right now, once I've conducted a preference assessment, I've determined the items that are typically motivating for them, at least for this week, right? I can make a choice board. So I'll take pictures of those items, put them all in a grid, print out the paper so I can show it to my child and be like, okay, what do you want to work for? What are you into right now? What do you want to do? What leisure activity would you like to do? And they can just touch the picture, make their choice. Yeah, and allow the child to choose activities, list out or outline what needs to be done, and then once it's complete, it cannot be accessed again. So for example, I know that Stephen likes to color, so coloring is a choice that he makes. After coloring, the choice of coloring is no longer available. So it's not necessarily that he can just have like free access to the coloring. If that is something that's super highly motivating for him, we might want to keep that again for those times where we're going to have to ask him to do something that he really doesn't want to do, or that's just he's not motivated to do it. And we need to kind of bring out the big guns, right? We want to bring out the coloring books because we know that's going to be super highly motivating for him. So once he completes that non-preferred task, then he can have access to the coloring books. And then relating to the child. Yeah. So again, functional and appropriate. So examples of some functional activities could be sitting and listening to a story, cleaning up a work area, learning about safety, learning about house rules, and then relevancy to the child's life. Some examples could be discussing up and coming holidays, and or like speaking about becoming a big brother or a sister. And then documenting improvement. So this is as much for us as it is for our clients or our kiddos. And sometimes it doesn't look like there's any improvement in a child's behavior or in their acquisition of skills, or improvement may be slight or it might be incremental. But data is super telling, right? Like our data lets us know everything that's going on. I just had a conversation last week with one of my RBTs, um, talking about how far one of our clients has come, all of the improvements that client has made, like the skill acquisition, the behavior reduction. Like he's doing so amazing. And my RBT was like, he just wasn't seeing it because he's with my client every day, right? So sometimes when you're in it every single day, you don't necessarily notice those changes because they can be like incremental over time. But I showed him um our client's behavior data graph, and it was like a sharp decrease. Like the data was very, very clear about how significant this increase was, but it was something that had started back in October. So while my RBT may not have necessarily like noticed it day to day, being able to show that progress through the data like meant everything, right? So um again, like an example on our slide, maybe Jack needed to be redirected 10 times this week, but last week he needed to be redirected 15 times. Like that's a big improvement, right? It may not feel like it in the moment, and you may not notice that that's an improvement if you're not taking that data. Um, but that's why data is so important, because that really, I mean, the data doesn't lie, you know. Um, it gives us just a really, really clear picture on what's going on with our clients, um, and where that improvement, where it is, you know. You can look right at that graph and you can see what's going on. So, tell your BCBA behaviors that you would like to have as a part of your programming. If there are behaviors that you want to track at home and you need assistance with that, let your BCBA know and they can help you come up with a data collection system that you can use, because it really, like, as much as we're talking about motivating our kids in this presentation, I will say reviewing data is really motivating to me as a clinician. I know it's motivating to parents that I've shared data with. So that could be something that's motivating to you and to your family too. So that's just something to keep in mind. And then be patient. So it's really important to always remember history of reinforcement, right? Or your learned history of behavior. So that basically means that behaviors or habits that have been reinforced or rewarded for long periods of time can take a while to undo, right? So, for example, if your child, before they learned to communicate or use a choice board or use an AAC device or whatever it is, if they learned that screaming was a really great way to get my mom's attention and that worked for them for, 3, 4 years, they're not overnight just going to start using functional communication, right? There's still going to be some of that screaming going on in order to get attention, because that child's history of reinforcement has taught them that screaming will get them what they want or what they need. Um, so it's not something that's going to change overnight. It's going to be a process. It's sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's quick. It's very individualized, but that is something that's really, really important to remember. And I talk to my RBTs about this as well, and my parents too. Like, you can't, just because your client is able to say, I want Legos, it doesn't mean that they're always like they're never going to scream for it, right? Because that worked for them for so long in their life. So it takes time, and we just have to be patient. And again, like, meet our kids where they are. Push them within reason, have those positive expectations, but meet them where they are and be patient. So, just some more examples of individual reinforcer systems. So, a token economy or a delayed reinforcement system. So, that is kind of a more common one that I see at my clinic, where our kiddos will earn a token on a token board for a certain number of responses that they give you, right? So, if I'm sitting with a client and we're, like, for example, we're working on completing homework or something. Um, I might give them a token for every math problem that they finish. And then once they've earned 5 tokens, they can take a break from their work and they can have access to their reinforcer. So that's just kind of a way to keep your keep your client or child, keep them motivated throughout a task that they're not super motivated to do, because they know that once they've earned the required amount of tokens, they can take a break and they can have access to their reinforcers. So you might use immediate tangibles on a fixed ratio. Um, so for example, if you want your kiddo to participate in like a Go Noodle activity, every 1 minute that they are imitating like the movements and whatever those videos do, you might, give them some praise if that's something that's motivating to them. You might give them like a squish ball if that's motivating to them. Um, could be really anything, but just immediate tangible on a fixed ratio. And then also immediate tangibles on an intermittent ratio. So that would be, maybe I need my kiddo to think of an example. You could use this with a token board too, right? So if we're sitting there and doing math problems, sometimes my client might do one math problem and I give them a token. Sometimes they'll do three and then I give them a token. Sometimes they do two math problems and I give them a token. So they can't necessarily predict when the reinforcement's coming or when the token is coming. So that might keep them more motivated in engaging with that activity because they're not sure like when they're gonna get it. But those are all really individualized. Again, I know everything I'm saying, I'm like, well, it depends. But that's just ABA, right? It's really individualized and it's based on your child's needs and what motivates them, um, and how much reinforcement they need in order to complete like varying levels of, tasks with varying levels of difficulty. And then what is our role in this? We need to make learning fun and we need to keep our children on task and engaged with what is going on around their environment. And we need to promote acquisition of skills to a functional and applicable and mastered level. And then there's some more resources if you're interested in learning more. There's an article listed here and also a YouTube link. And then, oh yeah, you can also Google Class Dojo. I'm not sure if your son is in school or if they use that, but that Class Dojo is one that I see a lot in schools. Teachers can just kind of click on different students' little icons and give them dojo points, and then the dojo points can be exchanged for whatever reinforcer, at the end of the week or end of the day or whatever the teacher decides to do. Today, the focus of our presentation is on